I entered into an arranged marriage. My father-in-law is a successful businessman, owning several grocery stores. My mother-in-law is quirky and reticent. After a miscarriage, my relationship with my husband started to cool, leading to his affair. During this tough time, it was my unusual mother-in-law who came to my rescue. My name is Jane. I'm 33 years old. I married 10 years ago and have been living with my husband's parents and my husband ever since. We don't have any children. I had an arranged marriage with my husband, Daniel. Back then, I lived with my parents and brother, a family of 4. My family has long resided in our local community, and my father was the president of the neighborhood association. This meant we often had people coming over for favors or advice. One day, a matchmaker, a lady who enjoyed setting up men and women, came for a consultation. It's a role you don't hear about much these days. She mentioned that the sole heir of a local supermarket chain was looking for a wife and asked if we knew any suitable candidates. I was serving tea and snacks, thinking it was none of my business, so I was shocked when my dad suddenly asked, "Hey, Jane. How about you try meeting him?" Indeed, I had never been in a relationship and didn't seek employment after graduating from community college, instead helping with housework. But that was because our house, with frequent visitors, was too much for my mom to handle alone. I learned a lot from her, from cooking to various household chores. My hobbies are cooking, reading, and crafts. Perhaps my father worried about his introverted, indoor-loving daughter meeting men in the future. He said, "The son of a supermarket founder who owns several stores, 30 years old, isn't it a good match? Why not meet him at least? He's quite a catch, you know," and showed me a photo. The photo did make him look sincere and likable. Most of all, he resembled my favorite actor. Even the matchmaker chimed in, "Jane, you would be perfect. You two would be an ideal pair." I started to say, but only to be interrupted by her saying, "If you don't like him, you can always say no after the meeting." I felt the pressure and complied. Even my mom joined in, "It's fine. If you don't like him, I'll turn him down for you. Just go and enjoy a nice meal," and took me shopping for a new dress at the department store. She scolded me, "You really show no interest in men or makeup. Your father is worried, you know." The following year, my father was retiring as the neighborhood association president, and my brother was getting married, bringing his wife to live with us. My parents probably worried about my place in the house diminishing. They thought it'd be better for a daughter like me to marry into a good family. On the day of the meeting, I got my hair and makeup done at a salon and wore the dress my mom and I chose. I looked like a different person. "You're much prettier than your photo," said Daniel, who resembled the actor Brad Pitt. While the matchmaker was quickly introducing us, I barely heard anything. Then I heard her say, "I'll leave you young folks to it." "I can't believe she actually said that line," I said, surprised. Daniel chuckled and replied, "Well, you don't hear that much these days. She's from the old school." His smile was charming, and I wondered why someone like him would resort to an arranged marriage. Seems like my face gave away my thoughts, as Daniel explained. "That lady is an old family friend of my dad. Knowing I wasn't married at 30, she kept pestering me to have an arranged meeting. I came only to fulfill my duty, as my dad said, but I'm glad I did because you are a wonderful person." Hearing that, I couldn't help but say, "Me too." It was a bit frustrating to go along with the matchmaker's scheme, but Daniel and I decided to get married. The wedding and reception were lavish, with many guests, and we went to Europe for our honeymoon. After the whirlwind of dreamlike days, my new life at my husband's home began. My father-in-law was a robust, cheerful man who seemed very dependable. My mother-in-law was quiet, often staying in her room. I was surprised that a housewife would have her own private room in such a big house. Right after I moved in, she told me, "I'm not good with housework, Jane, so I'll leave it to you. We have a cleaning service twice a week." I had thought that as a daughter-in-law, I'd be closely instructed on cooking and cleaning, the household ways. My mother-in-law, true to her word, didn't involve herself in the housework at all. She ate the meals I cooked without a single complaint and retreated to her room after eating. I felt she didn't dislike me, especially when she would sometimes make tea at 3 p.m. and share delicious ordered-in sweets with me. Make the tea with boiling water. Wait until the tea leaves fully open. The tea she made always smelled wonderful and tasted great. Usually not much of a talker, she spoke quite a bit during these moments. "What do you usually do in your room?" I asked her one day, gathering my courage. "I do some research on my computer, read books, and watch movies," she replied. She was so different from my mother, who was always busy with caring for others and household chores. "Do you think it's a luxury for a housewife to have her own room?" My mother-in-law seemed to read my mind and asked. "It was originally my husband's room. But he's a social butterfly and didn't like being alone in his room, so he was always in the living room. I decided I might as well use it," she said with a warm smile, making me grow fond of my quirky mother-in-law. About a year into our peaceful and happy marriage, I got pregnant. Daniel, my in-laws, and my family were all thrilled. It was probably the happiest time of my life. But soon after sharing the news with everyone, I had a miscarriage. The doctor said early miscarriages are common and that I was still young, so I shouldn't be too down. Daniel, my in-laws, and my family comforted me, but I was deeply shocked. I had always thought that getting married and having a baby was just what women did. It was only when I experienced it myself that I realized some couples can't have children and that there are many complications with pregnancy and childbirth. "I'm so sorry," I said to my in-laws. "Why are you apologizing? You're the one who's suffering the most," my mother-in-law said, embracing me. Her kindness was a great comfort to me. I read many stories online and in magazines about women who got pregnant and had successful births after miscarriages. So, I was sure I'd be fine and would get pregnant again soon. But as time passed without me getting pregnant, I became increasingly anxious. Looking back, I think I was obsessed with getting pregnant. I wanted to make up for my failure, not be seen as a useless wife who couldn't have children, driven by such ugly emotions. It was perhaps inevitable that our marital life, which had become a duty, was avoided by Daniel. But I never imagined he would have an affair. Even when I found receipts from fancy restaurants in Daniel's suit pocket, noticed CDs in his car that were not to his taste, I didn't think he was cheating. I noticed he was frequently texting someone, but I couldn't bring myself to voice my suspicions. Then, my father-in-law had a stroke, survived but was left with paralysis on one side of his body, and retired from work. Daniel took over as the president of the company. Initially as acting president. My mother-in-law and I were left to care for my father-in-law at home. "If you hadn't been here, we would have had to put him in a facility," my mother-in-law said while caring for him attentively. That's when I realized that there was love between this couple. In contrast, what about Daniel and me? It's been 10 years since we got married. Now we sleep in separate bedrooms and barely talk, not to mention having a marital relationship. Daniel, busy with his new role as president, started coming home less often. When he did come home, he would grumble, "This house is so depressing. A father with paralysis, a weird mother, and a gloomy wife. It's just uncomfortable." Recently, I became certain that Daniel was having an affair. He would brazenly talk on the phone with another woman at home, pretending she was a business associate. But I could tell from his expression that she was not. Where did I go wrong? If only I hadn't had the miscarriage. It's pointless to think about it now, but maybe I shouldn't have been so desperate to get pregnant again? Was it wrong not to confront Daniel when I first suspected him of cheating? By the time I realized it, it felt like it was too late to fix anything. One day, I unfolded a piece of paper from the pocket of Daniel's suit when he returned from a supposed inspection trip. I felt like the world went dark before my eyes, and I nearly collapsed. It was a child's drawing of a father, seemingly drawn by a 4 or 5-year-old. The cute drawing with the word daddy written in shaky letters painfully gouged at my heart. "Hey, what are you doing? You look like a thief," Daniel coldly remarked as he entered the room. "Ah, I see. She must have put it in my pocket without me knowing. Kids, you know, can't help it," he said nonchalantly upon seeing the piece of paper in my hand. "You knew, didn't you? That I have another woman." "I knew, but I didn't know about the child." The existence of a child he had with someone else, something he never had with me, crushed me. "Yeah, kids are adorable. You're pretty much like a housekeeper now, so you can leave if you want. I'll give you some alimony," he said, implying that if I left, he'd probably remarry his mistress, who already had his child. It might even be better for this family. The next morning, as I prepared his breakfast with a tear-streaked face, Daniel clicked his tongue and left for work without eating. After cooling down my swollen face to a presentable state, I went to my father-in-law's room, where I was embarrassed to see Mr. Smith, who looked surprised for a moment upon seeing my face. Mr. Smith has been my father-in-law's secretary, more of a personal secretary than a company one, a man in his mid-40s. I've known him since I married into the family 10 years ago, but never saw him smile. He's always impeccably polite and unflappable. "As for me, I'll take my leave now," he said, as usual. I resolved to tell my in-laws what I had decided the night before. "There's no need for Jane to leave," my mother-in-law said without changing her expression. "But the one who broke the rules first was our son. You've done nothing wrong. If I had to say, it's 80 to 20, no, 90 to 10 his fault. But we couldn't have children. That doesn't matter. You're a good daughter-in-law. And if you leave, it'd be hard for me to take care of him alone," she said as my father-in-law nodded in agreement. "Can I stay in this house? Of course, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. Make your own choice. Choose for myself. I've always been swept along, doing as told, pretending not to notice things I wanted to say. I want to stay here." For the first time, I felt like I clearly expressed my own will. Half a year later, my father-in-law had another stroke in his sleep and passed away. My mother-in-law took charge as the chief mourner, not leaving it to Daniel. Daniel responded solemnly to the condolences but didn't seem very sad. After my father-in-law's death, I noticed something was off with my mother-in-law. Instead of staying in her room upstairs, she began spending more time sitting on the living room sofa, blankly watching TV. She wouldn't change the channel, just staring at the screen, not even laughing at comedy shows. Seeing her like this, Daniel said loud enough for her to hear, "Dad dies and she goes senile." What a nuisance. "How can you say that? Aren't you worried?" I challenged him, only to be met with a shocking response. "Instead of worrying about her, why haven't you left yet? Still after the inheritance?" I never even thought of such a thing, and his words saddened me. Then, my mother-in-law tried to go out to the garden, fell at the entrance, and badly sprained her ankle. We got a wheelchair for her, as moving around the house became difficult. The house is spacious, so she doesn't bump into things, but it's old and not wheelchair-friendly. Every time she got stuck on a small step, I had to lift the wheelchair. Seeing this, Daniel, returning from work, said nothing to help. "A sprain? She'll become even more senile if she can't walk. I'm totally against caregiving, so Jane, take care of the old lady until she dies, will you?" I lost my temper at Daniel's words. "What's wrong with you? Is that how a son should speak?" Yeah. Keep scoring points like that. "I'll give you a share of the inheritance, so keep it up," he said dismissively and left. Probably to the house where his mistress and child were waiting. I felt a surge of anger and frustration, on the verge of tears. Then, suddenly, my mother-in-law burst into laughter. "What? What's wrong?" For a moment, I thought she had really lost her mind. But then she spoke clearly. "Oh, it's so funny. What a foolish son. I've made up my mind. First, we'll start by selling the house." "What?" She pulled out her smartphone from her pocket and called Mr. Smith. As I stood there bewildered, she said, "Sorry, Jane. I was indeed feeling down after my husband died, but I wasn't senile. I was just thinking." But you didn't react at all to the TV. Well, that can't be helped. It's just not funny. Mr. Smith arrived with some documents. The performance under Daniel as acting president has been poor. Not just the sales of each store, but employee morale is down too. A major cause is Kate, your retirement from management alongside the president, but Daniel's wasteful habits can't be ignored either, he explained, showing some data to her. Kate is my mother-in-law's name. What? What do you mean? I asked, completely taken aback. Mr. Smith responded, our company's actual manager was Kate. The company grew significantly thanks to the president's popularity and Kate's sense for business. And Mr. Smith, it's thanks to you as well. You compensated for what we as a couple lacked. So, the reason you stayed in your own room was? I could access all the store data and surveillance camera footage on her computer in that room. True, I did spend time reading books and watching movies, but that wasn't all I was doing. But why? Wouldn't a vice president role have been enough? Because I'm not cut out to be a leader, Kate said, looking into the distance. Probably picturing her late husband. I've seen Daniel's true nature and intentions. I can't entrust the company to him. I have no intention of handing over the land or the house either. Mr. Smith, would you like to be the president? Can the presidency be handed over just like that? No, I'm like you, Kate. I'm not suited to be a leader either. Well, that's a problem. Then, Jane, it looks like you should be the president. What? I couldn't believe what Kate was suggesting. A person like me with no business experience suddenly becoming a president was unthinkable. When I voiced my concerns, Kate reassured, it's okay, Mr. Smith will support you. I have a knack for understanding people. You, Jane, have a charm that inspires people to help you. That's enough for a president. Jane, you would be suitable. You're kind and considerate, and there's a trend of welcoming female executives. It will be fine. Even Mr. Smith agreed with this. But what about your real son? I asked, only to be shocked by the revelation. Daniel isn't my biological son. My in-laws had been unable to have children. In those days, before infertility treatments were advanced, infertility was often blamed on women, and Kate had suffered a lot. Ultimately, the problem was with my husband, but by the time we realized, I was already over 40. So, we adopted a child from a distant relative with many kids. Daniel was already 5 when he came to this house, so he should know. Was that why he could treat her so terribly? Earlier, I said I had a knack for understanding people, but I guess I don't understand children. Oh, how dreadful. That would mean I raised him wrong, Kate said with a wry smile. Anyway, Daniel has failed as both a business leader and a family man. Mr. Smith has gathered irrefutable evidence of his infidelity. We will have him leave the company and this house. I realized that if Kate said it, it would surely happen. Mr. Smith, please start the process to sell this place quickly. I think a high-rise condo near the station here would be good for a new home. It's getting hard to climb stairs at my age. Wait, so the reason you've been staying in the living room recently is? I retired from management, but also, there's only one toilet on the first floor of this house. It's inconvenient for an elderly person. Kate said with a resigned expression. I found her slightly adorable in that moment. So, Jane, will you take the position of president? I will. I replied without hesitation, seeing it as a significant opportunity. An opportunity to change my personality and my life. On the day of my inauguration as president, Daniel burst in, looking furious. What is this? What's going on? Suddenly, Mr. Smith tells me to leave the house, and it's being demolished. I'm the president, not this woman. What kind of joke is this? He was shouting in front of all the employees. You were only ever the acting president. Based on the company's performance and employee feedback during your tenure, it's been determined that you are unfit to lead the company. I said coolly. The result of practicing in front of a mirror the night before. Also, those expensive suits you tailored and your nightly splurges at high-end clubs were all with company money. That's embezzlement, you know. We could sue you for that. The employees murmured in surprise and some even laughed mockingly. Damn it! You will regret this. Daniel spat out like a villain and fled the venue. I apologize for the unsightly scene. I may lack knowledge and experience, but with your help, I want to make this a better company. Please, I ask for your support. When I said this, a warm round of applause erupted from the audience. After the ceremony, Daniel was waiting outside. Hey! Don't mess with me! What happened to the house? It's mine, or will be once that old lady dies. Violence is not acceptable, said Mr. Smith as he twisted Daniel's arm, who was grabbing my collar and yelling. Ouch! Let go! How dare you, a mere secretary! Even a mere secretary is far more competent than a former foolish son. Kate, who had recovered from her sprain, walked in steadily and said, That house and land are already sold, and there's no place for you in this company anymore. You've been a son for a long time, so you'll get your legal share of the inheritance. Use that money to start over somewhere unknown. Emulating Kate's resolute attitude, I said, Here's the divorce papers. I've already filled in my part, and thrust the papers at him. Finally, Mr. Smith added, Oh, by the way, it seems that the child of your mistress isn't actually your son, Daniel. Perhaps you should check? What? No way, that can't be. Leaving a stunned Daniel behind, we walked away from the scene. Later, I heard from Mr. Smith that Daniel had confronted his mistress and, upon her easy confession, had thrown her out. Now alone, Daniel was reportedly spending his days in drunkenness. Even though he received a substantial inheritance, enough to open a new store. Mr. Smith told me this, but I felt no sympathy. The view from the top floor is indeed the best, Kate remarked, looking out of the large window of our new high-rise condo. The building had commercial facilities on the first and second floors, including a supermarket, bookstore, florist, and even a hospital and veterinary clinic. The supermarket was a new upscale venture we had launched. If Jane and Mr. Smith would get together, I'd have no regrets left. Kate suddenly said. Kate! You can't just say things like that. Right, Mr. Smith? Indeed, Kate. Honestly, you're impossible. I'm already 45, and Jane is only 35, Mr. Smith said, blushing slightly. Oh, come on. A 10-year difference is nothing. Your father and I had about the same age gap. And Mr. Smith, you always seemed concerned about Jane whenever you visited. Well, that was because Daniel's behavior was just too atrocious. I saw Mr. Smith flustered for the first time. 3 years later, much to my chagrin, or rather, delight, Kate's wishes surprisingly came true. I said I'd have no regrets, but now I do. To see my granddaughter's face like this, Kate said, lifting the newborn girl in her arms. She may not be related by blood. My now husband Mr. Smith remarked unnecessarily. That doesn't matter. You and Jane are my precious son and daughter, Kate said with a smile, holding her granddaughter. I felt truly fortunate to have met these people.